Okay, now we got a red light. So last week we studied Genesis 25, verses 19 to 28. Isaac had married Rebekah when he was 40. Well, we think she was a teen. Verse 21, now Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah his wife conceived. Now, verse 26 tells us that Isaac was 60 when their birth came. So it took them 20 years to have their first child. And that's why he was worried and prayed and thought she was barren, because 20 years they had no children. Now, they probably knew that God would come through because God promised Abraham that Isaac was the child of the line of promise in the line of the future Messiah. So he has to have sons eventually. But Isaac had to wait 20 years, and the Lord does grant his plea. Verse 22, but the children struggled together within her, and she said, if all is well, why am I like this? So she went to inquire of the Lord. She was certainly confused, and not surprisingly, because in modern times, 3% of all pregnancies have more than one child, meaning twins or multiples children. So it's fairly rare, but in the ancient world, it's thought to have been only 1 or 2%. And so none of the people she knew probably had any experience with twins. But apparently carrying twins is much harder than a normal pregnancy. Basically, they say your hormones go twice as crazy, you gain a lot more weight, you're a lot more tired, and you have more nausea and morning sickness. And the babies are often wrestling with each other inside, so causing a lot of fetal movement. And Rebekah's nervous about all this turmoil going inside, and she prays. She thinks it can't be normal, and the Lord tells her what's going on in verse 23. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. So when Jesus answers her, first he gives her the good news. Your pregnancy will be successful, and the reason you feel weird is because you have twins, 2 brothers, in fact. That's implied because he said they will become 2 nations, and you only become a nation with males. But he also says the older will serve the younger, and they will not be unified. They will be different, and they will go different directions entirely. The question I ask, and my opinion is that Rebekah did not tell Isaac, her husband, about everything Jesus said. Or, if she told him, he didn't believe her, because there's no evidence at all that Isaac ever tried to support the younger. In fact, you'll see that it's the mother who supports Jacob, and the father supports Esau. So I think that if he had believed Jesus' word, he would have paid more attention to young Jacob. Verses 24 to 26. So when her days were fulfilled for her to give birth, indeed there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red. He was like a hairy garment all over, and so they called his name Esau. Afterward his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. Apparently it's very common for babies to be born red or even purple, but it's not dangerous and it goes away within a day or 2. But what it may imply is not just that the baby's skin was red, but that the baby's hair was red. And what is stated is the amazing hairiness of this newborn Esau. I read that about 1 in 20,000 babies is born with a hairy body, with hair covering more than half of their body. It is a genetic mutation, and this might be the first time a genetic mutation is mentioned in the Bible. Because the farther the human line gets from Adam, the more DNA imperfect genes will come through, especially when the chances are doubled by intermarriage. When you marry close relatives, the mutations multiply. And that may have eventually led to the practice of not marrying close relatives. But Esau continued to be hairy throughout his life, so it wasn't just a baby thing. And the name Esau does not mean hairy in ancient Hebrew, although it does mean hairy in other local languages, like Arabic later came to mean Esau means hairy. Now, I better turn my phone down. I hear the volume is on. There we go. Now, Jacob, though, his name is very clear in meaning. It literally means to grab by the heel. But in slang and in ancient language meaning, it meant a person of cunning or deceit who wins by tripping people up. So if you think of running in a race, it means that Jacob would be the kind of guy who would trip you on purpose so that he could win. Very competitive kind of a person. Now verses 27 and 28. So the boys grew And Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field. But Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So the boys grew up in very different ways. Esau was the daddy's boy, rough and tumble hunter, sportsman, always out in the wilderness searching for wild meat, wanting to kill things. Meanwhile, Jacob has soft hands, works with his mom, probably studies or does tent chores, learns more domestic duties. So you could call Jacob perhaps a mama's boy. Now this starts as a small problem, but it will become a much bigger problem. That is because the parents are choosing to love one child more than another because of his personality. Dad likes Esau, so dad loves Esau more. Mom loves Jacob, so mom loves Jacob more. This is called favoritism, and it can lead to really big problems in families and in the psychology of the children. Because if you love one child more than another, they can sense it, even if you think it's a secret. And that will push the child to either rebel and act out to get your attention, or it will encourage the child to cling to another parent and reject you. And this creates a divided house. And this house will become even more divided in the very near future, as we'll see coming up today. Now, not having favorites, though, is only a rule for humans. It's not a rule for God, because God does have favorites. And we spent the rest of our time last week showing Romans 9, where Paul talks a lot about Esau and Jacob. In Romans 9, verses 6 through 9, we're told that Isaac was the child of promise and not Ishmael. In short, being related to Abraham doesn't make you a child of God. Genetics are not the key to God's love. But then Paul notes that there's an objection to that in verses 10 through 13. Some object and say, well, yeah, but Isaac was from Abraham and Sarah, so he had two good parents. But Ishmael was from Abraham and Hagar, so he only had one good parent. So obviously the pure Jew would be loved by God. But Paul shoots down that theory because he says, well, look at Isaac and Rebekah. Both Isaac and Rebekah are pure blood Jews, so to speak, genetically, from Abraham's family. And they gave birth to two pure blood boys, Esau and Jacob. And yet God loved one and hated the other. And thus, one was not a child of God, even though he was genetically Jewish. In fact, Paul tells us that they were chosen and rejected before they were born. This is proof that it has nothing to do with the child. There's nothing about Esau God disliked more than Jacob that he liked. Both of them weren't even born when God chose them. This doctrine is called election. And Paul quotes Genesis 25 with the prophecy about Jacob and Esau that the older shall serve the younger. But there's another part that Paul quotes there from Malachi 1:1-3. So I'll read you those verses. The burden of the word of the Lord to Israel by Malachi. I have loved you, says the Lord. Yet you say, in what way have you loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother? Says the Lord. Yet Jacob have I loved, and Esau I have hated, and laid waste to his mountains and his heritage for the jackals of the wilderness. So Paul quotes Malachi to say that God loves one and hates the other, even though they were both born Jews. And Paul then doubles down on that same truth in verses 14 through 16 of Romans 9. What shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness in God? Certainly not. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whomever I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whomever I will have compassion. So it is not of him who wills, nor of him who runs, but of God who shows mercy. So God chooses to show mercy to some and chooses not to show mercy to others. And it is based in no way on their worthiness or their deeds. The Arminians claim that God foresees that in the future Jacob will be a good boy and Esau will be a wicked boy. Therefore, God chooses the good boy. That is nonsense. That is works-based righteousness. God likes them because they're good. No, God did not choose you because you were good. He couldn't. You weren't even born. God made these choices before the foundation of the world, before the stars were created, before the angels sang, possibly even before God created time, because God's plans are eternal. And so not only can you take no pride in yourself because you're a Christian, because it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with your color, your height, your weight, how much hair you have, how loud you talk, how nice your clothes are, your brilliance or your stupidity. None of that has anything to do with your salvation. God chose you because he wanted to, and there's no other reason. So God does play favorites. He loves whom he chooses, and he rejects whom he chooses. And it's not unfair. It has nothing to do with fairness, because no human deserves to be chosen. We all deserve to be rejected. And the fact that God chose some of us is simply mercy. So that ends the review. And now we will continue in Genesis 25, starting in verse 39. Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. Now from the rest of this story, in the next few verses, we can guess or think that Jacob was probably a good cook. He spent a lot of time with his mother, and that probably included learning to cook. Now she and her servants would spend a lot of time cooking for the family and for the servants. Perhaps they made large quantities of food for the workers who took care of the sheep. But Esau, he had little time for cooking, at least not this kind of cooking in tents. It sounds like he, like many modern men, was more expert with the grill. He liked barbecue. He liked to fry meat. We're told that Isaac, his father, loved wild meat. So let's turn over now to a future story. Turn over to Genesis 27, verses 3 and 4. This shows more about Isaac and Esau and the love of meat. Genesis 27, verses 3 and 4. This is Isaac talking. Now, therefore, please take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out into the field and hunt game for me, and make me savory food such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat. Then my soul may bless you before I die. So this is old Isaac, probably in his 80s or 90s. He's thinking he's near death, although he's wrong about that, actually. But he's preparing to bless his oldest son, Esau. And this tells us how Esau hunts. He uses a bow and arrow, and probably certainly a knife. That's implied in take your weapons. And he goes out in the wild to find wild food. This is the second time we were told that Isaac loves Esau because he loved eating wild meat. That's interesting. It's possible, not necessarily implied, but perhaps Isaac is something of a glutton, or he just really likes the taste of venison. But what kind of animals might Esau be killing out there in the field? Deuteronomy 12 gives us a couple examples. This is Deuteronomy 12, verses 22 to 25. It offers some details about wild meat. Just as the gazelle and the deer are eaten, so you may eat them. The unclean and the clean alike may eat them. Only be sure that you do not eat the blood, for the blood is the life. You may not eat the life with the meat. You shall not eat it. You shall pour it on the earth like water. You shall not eat it, that it may go well with you and your children after you when you do what is right in the sight of the Lord. So this tells us that gazelle and deer were still common even 300 years later in Judea, long after Esau was dead. Now, Moses says you can hunt and eat all the wild game you want as long as you drain out all the blood. And this is also stated in Leviticus 17, verses 13 and 14. Whatever man of the children of Israel or of the strangers who dwell among you, who hunts and catches any animal or bird that may be eaten, he shall pour out its blood and cover it with dust. For it is the life of all flesh. Its blood sustains its life. Therefore I said to the children of Israel, you shall not eat the blood of any flesh, for the life of all flesh is its blood. Whoever eats it shall be cut off. So in the Mosaic law, if you caught a wild animal, you had to drain it of all its blood and then cover the blood with dirt. It's interesting. It's almost a little burial ceremony. Now, what is all this about the blood? Why can't you eat the blood? This goes all the way back to Noah, to Genesis chapter 9, verses 1 through 4. So God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth, on every bird of the air, on all that move on the earth, on all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hand. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you all things, even as the green herbs. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. So God told Noah, that's Jesus, that the blood is the life. The life is sacred to God. Human blood, if you shed it, requires the death penalty. But eating animals was allowed after the flood, but eating their blood was not. It has some kind of sacredness. Perhaps it was because blood sacrifices would be the atonement for sin until the death of Jesus ended that. So what that means is, in Genesis, is that Esau is supposed to be hunting with some ethics. It's not a free-for-all. The allowance for eating meat did not strip all rules from killing animals. God still set standards of care, so to speak. You must practice a kind of reverence and thank God for the life you took. And we assume that since Isaac was a righteous man, he did not allow Esau to cook the animals with their blood. They had to be drained. So now we'll read Genesis 25, verse 30. And Esau said to Jacob, "Please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary." Therefore his name was called Edom. Now the normal diet of a Jewish person included very little meat. That's because poor people could probably only have meat once a week, likely a few bites on a Sabbath day. But Isaac, he is rich, and he can have a lot more meat. And also his people are shepherds, so they probably eat the male rams fairly often. That's because you mostly just keep a few rams around and then lots of ewes. The same is true of goats. So when they ate the meat, it would probably be sheep or goats. But Isaac loved the rare taste perhaps of deer, gazelles, perhaps rabbits and conies and birds, if Esau could get them. Birds were probably not yet domesticated. I learned recently that chickens were only, for the first time, domesticated by the Romans about 3 centuries before Christ. So chickens weren't domesticated at the time. So birds would only be caught in traps. It is possible that Isaac had become too enamored by Esau's foods, and possibly a glutton, although the text doesn't infer that necessarily. But it is true that Esau's lifestyle is shown negatively here. Now, I don't believe it was because he was a hunter. It's not hunting per se that was frowned upon. It was his lifestyle. His outdoor lifestyle was simply one aspect of his living as an irresponsible person. In other words, his hunting may have just been the symptom of not wanting to work, not wanting to be a helper at home, wanting to be all alone and on his own and killing things all the time. It sounds like Esau did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. And he probably didn't help the family business at all. If he's out hunting all the time, he's not helping with the sheep, is he? So with the approval of his meat-eating, meat-loving father, Esau is flaunting his independence. I'm the oldest son and I don't have to be responsible because I'm the chosen one. Now at that time, because there was no refrigeration, when you caught meat, you had to eat it all, or you smoked it or salted it and made jerky out of it. The most common and popular way, though, of cooking meat in the ancient world was to make stew or broth, which is what Jacob was doing here. And the one oddity here is the reference to the stew being red. In fact, it's implied that it was very red. Now, surprisingly, this is a problem because in the ancient world, very little ancient food was red. That's because most red foods were only found in the American continent, which hadn't been discovered yet. Tomatoes and red peppers were not found in Asia or the ancient world in the Bible. So they didn't have red stuff to put in, and almost all of the spices that were red lose their red color when they're cooked. Red lentils, for instance, when you cook them, turn brown. There is a red spice called sumac, and it was widely used, but it was so strong and bitter you wouldn't use a lot of it, not enough to turn your stew red, or it wouldn't be very tasty. So there's two answers, I think, that might solve the problem about red stew. The most common stew used by Jewish people even today is called red lentil stew. And the lentils start as red, but they turn brown when cooked. One possibility is that Esau was so hungry that he doesn't even want to wait for the stew to be fully cooked. The lentils aren't even cooked yet, and he wants it because he's hungry. That's one possibility. The other one is that the Hebrew word for red can also mean ginger color or reddish brown. Like the red heifer, when we talk about a red heifer, it wasn't really red, it was sort of brownish red, and that qualified as red. So it's also possible that the stew was just brownish red. But the oddity here, too, is about Esau. It says that he was therefore called Edom, and Edom does mean red, which adds another puzzle to it. Why would you name a guy, give him a new name, just because he ate red stew? You know, that doesn't sound likely, and I don't think that's why he was named. I think what's happening here is that Moses is playing some word games. Esau was a red, hairy man, and Jacob was cooking red stew, and Esau loved red stew, and it's all funny, isn't it? Ha ha, everything is red. I think that's what's going on. It's a bit of wordplay with Moses that may have been common among the Jews. So now verses 31 and 32. But Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright today." And Esau said, "Look, I'm about to die, so what is this birthright to me?" Now we need to look at this concept of the birthright. This may be somewhat confusing and new to you. So turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 21. We'll look at a few verses from Deuteronomy 21, verses 15 through 17. Talks about the concept of the birthright in the Mosaic Law. Deuteronomy 21, 15 through 17. If a man has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and they have borne him children, both the loved and the unloved, and if the firstborn son is of her who is unloved, then it shall be, on the day he bequeaths his possessions to his sons, that he must not bestow firstborn status on the son of the loved wife in preference to the son of the unloved, the true firstborn. He shall acknowledge the son of the unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him the double portion of all that he has, for he is the beginning of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. Now, these verses, if you think about them, are pretty clearly a statement about Jacob and Esau and Isaac and Rebekah. Or, pardon me, Jacob later and Rachel and Leah. If you remember, Jacob marries one wife who he loves and one who he doesn't love. Leah he doesn't love. But Leah has the firstborn. So even if Jacob had been tempted to change the order, he's not supposed to do that. The firstborn son must get the birthright whether he is favored or not. Now, the one with the birthright gets twice as much inheritance and blessing as the next son. So in other words, this is a kind of a will. Esau is supposed to get 2/3 of the estate, and Jacob is supposed to get 1/3 of the estate in this case. So what this law means, though, is let's say Isaac had loved Jacob more than Esau. This law says you can't change it. You can't just give the inheritance to Jacob because you don't like Esau. Esau's the firstborn. So what it sounds like is that the father at some point in his life would give some kind of a contract, perhaps written or a token of proof that this is the firstborn, so that in the future the youngest kid can't go out and start making business deals and say, hey, I'm the older one, I can make deals, without authority. So in other words, the birthright is some proof of who was the firstborn. This may even also be a question about Abraham's dealing with Ishmael. In other words, Ishmael was the firstborn son, and he should have received the birthright, but he didn't. The difference, though, may be that Hagar was not technically a wife, but was a concubine, so you might go that way. But we also learn that a birthright can be lost or traded or sold or voluntarily parted with by the firstborn, and that's what happens here. Jacob asks Esau, when Esau says, I want your food, Jacob says, okay, fine, give me your birthright, and I'll give you some food. What that means is that a birthright can be voluntarily given up. Now, perhaps it would be invalid if it was stolen, but valid if signed over. In many countries in the ancient world, there were also, though, obligations for the firstborn son. And if the firstborn failed his obligations, his birthright could be taken away and given to someone else. So we'll look at the case when this happens in the Bible. Turn over to Genesis 49. It's interesting, we've come back to this passage a couple of times, and I think we'll come back a few more times. This is where Jacob blesses his sons in Egypt. Genesis 49, verses 1 through 4. The firstborn's about to lose his birthright. And Jacob called his sons together and said, Gather together, that I may tell you what shall befall you in the last days. Gather together and hear, you sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and the excellence of power. But unstable as water, you shall not excel, because you went up to your father's bed and you defiled it. He went up onto my couch. Now, this is interesting, what we discover or see from another passage. Reuben was the firstborn son of Jacob and Leah. You remember, Jacob didn't love Leah, he wanted Rachel, but he got tricked into taking Leah. And Reuben was the firstborn. It was Joseph who was the firstborn from Rachel. And Joseph loved Rachel more than Leah, and so it would have been tempting for Joseph to give the birthright to Joseph rather than to Reuben. And that is what Jacob does. However, it's not because he loved Rachel more. It's because Reuben was wicked and disqualified himself from receiving the blessing. What happened is Reuben got impulsive, and I hate to use the word, I won't use the word. Reuben got excited by one of his father's concubines by the name of Bilhah. And he went in and slept with Bilhah in his father's bed. And I guess he got caught, or at least Jacob found out about it. And for this wickedness, he loses his birthright. He will no longer get the first share of the inheritance. So that's how you can lose your birthright. But you can also give it away. Now, at this story in Genesis 25, Esau is not so wicked that his birthright is taken away by Isaac. Instead, Esau says he is starving, and his birthright is doing him no good now, so sure, I'll give it to you for a bowl of stew. Now verses 33 and 34. Then Jacob said, "Swear to me as of this day." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew full of lentils. Then he ate and drank and arose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Now, what is this about swearing? I'm guessing, like I said, that it was a contract, maybe a piece of paper or a token from Isaac, and he doesn't have it on his person. Esau doesn't have it with him, so he can't give it to him, and Jacob just makes him swear, "You're going to give me your birthright." And Esau swears because he wants the food now. Now, although the main topic today is Esau, we do need to discuss Jacob also. There's an old saying that it takes two to tango. And that's certainly true here. Esau is wicked, but Jacob is not a whole lot better. Now, they don't yet hate each other, or at least so far it's not too bad yet. I mean, Esau returns from a long day of hunting, apparently without success, or at least if he caught anything, he didn't eat it raw. So he comes back exhausted and hungry, and he smells something good in the tent. Maybe Esau and Jacob even shared a tent. A good and kind brother would have offered his brother food freely. I mean, how expensive is a bowl of lentil soup? It's pretty cheap, right? Wouldn't it be nice to just give your brother a bowl of soup? I would guess, though, that there had been times when Esau shared venison with Isaac and maybe not with Jacob, so maybe they didn't share very well. But at any rate, when Esau claims he's starving, Jacob takes advantage of his brother's hunger. Now, you know as well as I do that children, they play the "I'm starving" line every week. You're out driving, "I'm starving, I need food." All it means is they're hungry. None of your children are literally starving. They're just demanding food like naked little birds squawking in their nest. Esau is not literally starving, he's very hungry. Now, it's a physical feeling with a simple solution. All you have to do to stop it is to eat. But he doesn't want to cook for himself when there's already food prepared and almost ready to eat. What this is a sign of an impulsive person without self-control. He is willing to part with his future blessing of double inheritance for a bowl of stew on a whim. And this is clearly stated in Hebrews. If you turn over to Hebrews, we'll look at chapter 12. We usually look at Hebrews 11, the chapter on faith, but Esau does not appear in the chapter on faith. This is Hebrews chapter 12, verses 14 through 17. Hebrews 12, 14 through 17. "Pursue peace with all people and holiness, without which no one will see the Lord, looking carefully, lest anyone fall short of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up cause trouble, and by this many become defiled, lest there be any fornicator or profane person like Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. For you know that afterward, when he wanted to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought it diligently with tears." So here we get the story of Esau explained a little more. We'll be coming to this in a couple of weeks. But this thing with the stew, this is only the first step of the fall of Esau. You might even say that this was the end of God's attempts at calling in Esau's life. When Esau demonstrated that he didn't care about the future blessings of God, which were the blessings promised to the line of the Messiah, it proves that Esau is not from that line. People who care nothing for the blessings of the church and the blessings of God are not in the kingdom of God. Esau is selling it because he doesn't even want it. And when he finally realizes that he might want it, it's too late and it's gone. Esau was selfish and short-sighted. He has no concept of the future blessings he's given up for a momentary pleasure. And therein, that is the contrast with Jacob. Yes, Jacob is sinning by taking advantage of his brother. He's basically trading a $3 McDonald's meal for a $3 million future blessing and estate. So he is sinning against his brother. But Jacob is also showing that he cares about the blessing. He's taking the long view. Jacob is jealous of Esau, not for his hunting skills, but for the promises that he's going to inherit. Jacob wants desperately to be a part of the line of the Messiah. When he grasped Esau's heel at birth, it was a symbol of his ambitious nature. Unable to please his father Isaac, who favored Esau, Jacob took a different path. It does seem that Jacob learned the family business. He stayed home. He became an expert shepherd, as you'll see in future chapters when he lives with Laban. But even that didn't raise his stock with Isaac. Doing all the work for Isaac didn't make him love him. So he and Rebekah, his mother, became plotters. I would even suggest that based on future chapters, Rebekah helped Jacob decide on this path. And she probably told him, explained to him, you need to get the birthright from Esau. That's the first step to supplanting him. Remember that Jesus told Rebekah the younger would rule over the older. And so Rebekah already knows who's the winning horse, and she's teaching him how to do it. So I think Rebekah never told Isaac, or Isaac rejected that word from the Lord. So she and Jacob are plotting how to supplant Esau. Now, the fact that Jesus told them the older would serve the younger does not justify their actions. Just because Jesus told them what would happen doesn't mean it makes it right to lie, cheat, and steal to get it. Nor did Jesus tell Rebekah that Jacob should act to bring this truth to pass. What God says is going to happen with or without your help. So they didn't have to help God to get this done. But they chose to do it, and they did wrong. Yet they were doing God's will in the ultimate sense, even though they were sinning. But despite the sinful nature of their efforts, both Jacob and Rebekah showed that they wanted the blessing of God. They wanted the line of the Messiah. And this is best shown later. Turn over to Genesis 32. I want you to show you the nature of Jacob. What kind of a person is Jacob? This is in chapter 32, verses 24 to 28. He was alone and he was praying. Genesis 32, 24 to 28. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip went out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go, for the day breaks. But he said, I will not let you go until you bless me. So he said to him, what is your name? He said, Jacob. And he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. This is what Jacob's been his whole life. His whole life has been one of struggling and striving, and sometimes that showed itself in deceit, though not always. But this is in contrast to his brother Esau. Esau has very few good qualities. He's a cad. He's impulsive. He has no thought for the future, only for the present. He picks up girls wherever he finds them and marries them whenever he wants to. And this is a lot like most modern humans. Nothing matters but me. Nothing matters but now. Give it to me now. I want the girls, I want the food, I want the power, and I want it now. I don't care if I'm going to be bankrupt tomorrow. All that matters is now. That's the God of this world, you. You care only for the present because you care only for yourself. People who live in the present have no future except misery. Esau loses it all. Most humans will also lose it all. But Jacob, he does show some good qualities, even when they're hidden among his lies. But the strongest quality of Jacob is his ambition. Now, I'm not talking about naked ambition. That's certainly not good. I'm not talking about the ambition to be higher and better and more powerful and more rich than others. That was not his ambition. His ambition was to be the blessed one of God, and he would do anything to get it. God doesn't want people in heaven who don't want to be there. And there will be no such people in heaven. Heaven is where God is, and Christians want to be where God is. So in a sense, your fate is exactly what you want. If you want to be with your wicked friends forever, you will indeed be with them in hell. If you want to be with Jesus and the forgiven people of the church, you will be there with them in the new heavens and the new earth. And that's the true contrast between Jacob and Esau. Esau didn't care about his future. Jacob wanted the blessing of God. So the question is, which are you? Do you want the pleasures today, or do you want the eternal blessings in the future? Let's pray. Dear Lord, it's a strange story we're looking at, and it seems rather small, looking over a bowl of stew, having a meal together, and yet it shows so much about each man. And everything we do, even the meals we take, show a lot about us. Do we care only about this moment, what we get today, or do we also care about what we could have tomorrow, a good future by following you? Help us to be the latter, like Jacob, not in his lies, but in his ambition to be a part of your kingdom. In your name we pray. Amen. So are there any questions?